Everybody still there? All right. The screen is turned completely blue, but I'm hoping that
Yeah.
that's okay. Okay. Um,
Uh, I,
I just wanted to
sure.
welcome everybody tonight or tomorrow or wherever you are. This lecture is a very interesting one because where I am, it is April the 2nd, but our presenter, Francesco Mancini, is actually, it's April the 3rd. So the time zones are a fascinating aspect of this, but I'm Douglas MacLeod. I'm the chair of the Center for Architecture at Athabasca University. And I wanted to share with you that our university actually has staff and students in 84 different countries. And as such, many of us live and work on the traditional lands of indigenous people right around the world. I myself live on the unceded territory of the Syilx Nation, and we honor their ancestry, heritage, and gifts of all of these people and nations. And I would encourage you, if you like, to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat box. We also are supporting of the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we hope that we can act as allies in realizing recommendations such as call to action number 7, which says, we call upon the federal government to develop with Aboriginal groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational and employment gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. And this is, very much relevant to what we're talking about in this lecture series as well. So the when we start to talk about the future of architectural education, it's important to understand that for a number of years, we've worked with partners around the world, such as Francesco, on something we call the Global Studio. And I want to share with you, we just submitted today, we were nominated by our university for an award from the granting agency. If we get it, and it's going to be stiff competition, if we get it, we'll have $50,000 with which we can renew the Global Studio, and we would look forward to doing more of these kinds of events. And if something that you might be interested in, we'd be delighted to hear from you. But already, this lecture series, which really was, I should share with you how it developed. We at towards the end of the fiscal year in many universities and institutions around the world, there's stuff called budget dust, bits and pieces of dollars that are left over, surplus dollars. And when somebody mentioned that they had some at our university, we grabbed it. And it's a tribute to people like Emma Hansen, our program officer, and to Trevor Butler and the rest of our faculty that we were able to put this all together. So we've had some um, great talks so far. And I just want to point out tonight, yes, Francesco is speaking. On April the 9th, I'm going to be speaking about what we do at Athabasca University. And then on April 23rd, Phil Bernstein, who is the Associate Dean at Yale University, he's going to round out the series with a talk on AI and the education of an architect. So we'll put a link into the chat to our Instagram account, which is where you can find more information about each of these lectures and how to register for them. But tonight, um, as I mentioned, Francesco's been a part of the Global Studio since its beginning, and he is an Italian registered architect at Curtin University and the deputy head of the School of Design and the Built Environment in Perth, Australia. He holds a PhD and a postdoc in architecture, and his research interests include sustainable urban development and regeneration, place identity, architectural language, and design thinking. And he has published on urban morphology, identity, and building typology. So I'd like to welcome Francesco, and we're very much looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Douglas, for the kind introduction. And I would like to thank everyone for making the time today. It's really great to be here, even with the difference of time zone. And I'm very pleased to introduce this talk. But I would like to start by acknowledging the country in which I am at the moment. As you know, I'm speaking from Perth, Western Australia. And so I would like to respectfully acknowledge the elders and custodians of the Whadjuk Noongar Nation, past and present, their descendants and kin in their land on which I walk, live, and work every day. I feel very privileged being here, as well as the Curtin University, whose Bentley campus enjoys the privilege of being located on the side where the Deba Yarragan and the Dajagara meet, the two rivers of the region. The area is of great cultural significance and sustains the life and the well-being of the traditional custodians, past and present, of this land. And as a representative of Curtin University, I'm proud to honor the Noongar people and value this place of shared learning and their culture and their contribution to our life. And I recognize the impacts of colonization on Indigenous Australians. And I'm committed, as well as all Curtin, to moving forward together in a spirit of mutual honor and respect. Today, today's talk, I would like to speak about a few points that are interest, particularly my work, but I would suspect they also the points where our course and our colleagues had focused their attention, especially due to recent changes, dramatic shifts in the global scenario that have an impact on architecture, design, the built environment in general, and also societal impacts. These notes represent a personal reflection, and of course, they're not exhaustive or comprehensive, but because they deal with changes that are very different in nature and spans from disruptive phenomena that we face today in terms of technological disruption, but also mass migration, very large and global phenomenon. But it is possible perhaps to trace a trajectory towards the future and try to identify what is the role of architecture education and what is the ability for the discipline and whoever embrace the discipline to contribute to societal change or enhancing human life and human condition. The um, the the personal journey I went through that Douglas has summarized. This will not be a lecture about my personal journey, but just to give you a little bit of a context of where I'm coming from. Being born in Italy and studied in Italy, I grew up in the Mediterranean culture. I became registered in my own country. So my approach to architecture, the one that I've been taught in the 80s, essentially was still based and still is relevant on a discourse that was looking back at the history and the tradition, that was trying to find the best knowledge and examples for us to carry on our mission once we became registered or we became academics, as in my case. But my personal history is also made of different experience abroad in the United States, in Canada. I studied while doing my PhD, I worked a little bit in the United States, in New York at the Cooper Union, and I came into contact with many different cultures and many different approaches. And this has been driving my interest towards more global trends and phenomena that affect architecture. When I moved to Australia, I had the opportunity to get more in closer contact also with Eastern culture from different countries, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. Of course, I met these cultures in Italy as well. By the 80s and 90s, many communities had established in Italy, as well as I met them in different countries in the Middle East, where I practiced for 18 months, and in North America as well. So this is just a couple of examples of what was in my eyes, what I understood as architecture, the beautiful images of cities like Venice, incredible artwork by architects like Palladio, and a fantastic connection with place that was really embedded in a particular way to interpret place. But then when I started traveling, just before starting university, I came in touch with what we call modern architecture. And this was also a revelation, something that I had seen just on books and I could experience firsthand. Was really impressive to me at the time. And then I developed my PhD studies on the work of Peter Eisenman. I worked with him for a couple of years when I was in New York City while finishing the PhD. And then I had a chance to especially focus on understanding people, cultures, and places through the traces that they leave on the territory. This was a very interesting work, a work that I've then applied when I got in touch with the other side of the built environment, which is nature, something that was not very much in my education when I studied, but when I had the chance to live and study in Canada, in Ontario, at Waterloo University, I really appreciated what designers can do without building, for instance, and actually understanding ecology as a process. So all of these stimuli were part of my personal journey did included also some professional work that I did with the University of Roma in Italy, especially in the development of the new master plan of the new campus and the design of buildings that were part of the campus. This is a student dormitory. And of course, I started teaching as well, especially taking students to place and building on experience in place and learning from not so much from the past, but really from an experiential journey through real place, made of physical things. Architects produce artifacts, and this is something that has been staying with me. And in my view of what architecture can do by contribute to society, our expressions, our language, ways of contributing and leaving some outcomes for others to enjoy and live is through the architectural artifacts. So yes, the theoretical work is important. The speculation is absolutely important because it develops our critical thinking. But we have to be mindful that our job is not to be psychologists or sociologists. We definitely can listen and learn from many other disciplines, and this is what we should be doing. And probably the world is converging towards a very multidisciplinary approach to solve complex problems. But ultimately, that's what we do, and so we have to be cognizant of this particular mission to build better places for as many people as we can. This journey is my personal journey, but effectively between the 70s and the 90s, architecture and the world were going through a number of huge transformations that probably, at least looking at my personal experience, the discipline did not embrace fully. This is my sense looking back at what I've experienced in those years when I was a student and then a recent graduate and then a young architect. In 1972, and I like to use this date because it's the date where the Eiger-Pruitt complex was demolished, an ideological approach to modernism was really literally falling apart. The next year, the first oil crisis also marked a very important shift globally, and there was a sort of a wake-up call in terms of what's going to be a sustainable world in the next years. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and for Europe was an incredible moment that changed also everything in terms of geopolitical balance. So all of these changes changed actually also the world in which we live every day. But the response that I experienced was especially in the space of theoretical development in critical positions that we're somehow discussing what is the role of the architect. And there were very important contributions from feminism to deconstructivism. But the role of the architect and the future of the profession, and therefore what education of an architect should be or could be, was not put in crisis in a certain sense. The notwithstanding, the Kyoto Protocol and the emerge of important global movements and the interest that even the United Nations have developed for a sustainable life is based on environmental balance that could then lead and enable societies to live better. I felt that in these years until the 2000s, there was not much that the discipline or the debate within the discipline had taken into account. This is just to say that when we established the Architect series, which is very similar to what Reich is doing with this particular series, we felt that this was very, very important. It was very, very important for us to understand what is affecting the practice of architecture and all of these different layers and different positions and different views, how they can converge and actually suggest the school how to rethink and reshape what we do. We all come from a different world that we were living in a few years ago, and these kind of collective contribution was essential for us to step into a new reality and with a different level of awareness. So we have invited many contributors internationally, and we hope we can have someone from Athabasca and Reich and all the friends of this particular group in the global studio very soon to carry on the debate. But the scope of this particular presentation is to focus on some of the perspectives that we have listened to and we have received to offer a particular angle of about architectural education. As I said, one of the most important changes is probably that now I think we take for granted, but it's quite recent in my view, is really the definition of the role of the designer that shifted from this traditional role and iconic presence, of the Deus ex machina that they can resolve all the problems, and shifted from the authority to produce assertive solutions to an embracement of opportunities for an effective collaborative modus operandi to make positive societal impact through the built environment. There is another phenomenon that actually happens in these years, and it's the exponential growth and the expansion of large architectural or multi-services enterprises. And this was facilitated also by the diffusion of computer-aided design that effectively enable large practices to become even larger. And they adopted a very pragmatic approach to architecture. So on the one hand, we have the development and the focus on how theories and critical positions can inform both practice and education. On the other hand, we have the market of the profession that is moving away also from the atelier studio based towards a more corporate organization that is at least complementing the traditional architecture practice. These are, for me, very important points of reflection without dismissing any particular form of contribution. I think that there is, and the world the market is still demonstrating that there is space for both of both these approaches. There is an opportunity to contribute at a different level, and it's good that it is that way. But certainly, the changing scenario in the architectural profession is an important element to consider. So in this particular presentation, I have extracted some of the points that in particular three presenters have made in this series, but I think this is a work that I will keep doing because the connections between the different layers that architecture covers are impressive, and I think it's really worth at some point also to reflect on all of these contributions and look at them as a discourse carried on by multiple voices, not necessarily in context, but that certainly can shed some light on different aspects of both architecture, practice, and education. So the 3 points that I'm going to focus today on today are certain disruptive factors that have caused dramatic changes, paradigmatic changes, I would say, in the architecture practice and consequently in the way we could look at the education of the next generation. The first one is data computation. The second one is the climate change, and they're all interconnected. There is no real order, but and the third one is about artificial intelligence and what is the role of the human contribution, but to knowledge and making in the next future. They are, as I said, interconnected, but I will try to use some of the concept that the presenters that I have considered for this reflection have brought to us. So among David Jenotten, OMA, or Mabel Wilson, or Michelle Blakely, we have had Ross Donaldson. So Ross effectively focused on the big changes in terms of big numbers that are affecting the global scenario. Ross has been CEO of Woodsbeck and an educator at University of UWA and Curtin for a number of years. And he has totally transformed the practice, leading the practice to be the sixth largest practice globally in 2016 before he left. So he has a great understanding of these global phenomena that actually impact not only the profession but the world as such. Ross is also a member of the Climate Action and Sustainability Task Force established by the Australian Institute of Architects. So he took the approach that of looking at massive climate change and its consequences as the new ground line upon which architecture, urban design, and planning should be conceived and integrated. And he has seen the digital age as an opportunity, which probably is the best approach for all of us, cognizant of all the challenges that this might bring. So away from stylistic innovation, clearly stating that the role of the architect must focus on different necessary missions and actions. Programmatic innovation responds to different ways of living and also different challenges, and always provide intellectual context. So never be fully driven by market trends alone. And the idea that the architects, through their work, leave a legacy that is a shared legacy of the whole community, not just of their personal particular expression, is an important concept. And the opportunity to leave the mark, even in challenging times like this one, is an important element that acts as a strong motivation in every sector. The elements that the factors that Ross brought to our attention were explosion of urban migration and the necessity to accommodate 1/3 of the world population in developing regions by 2050. Of course, pollution is at the stake, but at the same time, development is growing fast, and this means to build 80 billion square meters in urban areas by 2030 and 150 billions by 2050. I think that someone calculated that this is the amount of square meters that have been built so far in the entire history of urban civilizations in the East and in the West altogether. And in a no-change scenario, this will lead to an increase in carbon emission of 50%. It's definitely a number we can't afford, and it is definitely a number that we have to keep in the back of our mind. Working with John and Rockstone from Potsdam Institute, they have claimed that 9 of the world's 15 major planetary systems have begun to tip, which means that our ecology is changing globally, and this is a pathway of no return. It certainly is to a point, but essentially knowing that we are now warming 170 times faster than in the past 7,000 years, we are facing an environmental change that has no precedence, and we are certainly at least partially responsible for that, which means though that we can perhaps work in a different direction before we reach the tipping point, and we're not that far from increasing the average temperature of 2 degrees, and there are already scenarios for higher increases of temperature and what this can lead to in terms of human inhabitation. For us, it is absolutely urgent to implement changes now, because in 10 years, we will have a new building stock that is coming globally and must be conceived and thought and performing in a different ways. And we know all the principles. We heard of that. The net zero approach, the regenerative approach, life cycle assessment. All of these elements must become part of our ethos before becoming part of our scientific knowledge. But the interesting part is that in Ross' position, this is the fundamental act. I mean, no one is dismissing any societal impact or any problem around social justice, for instance. But if we do not get this right, there will not be the conditions for those other conditions to thrive. And this is a very convincing argument in my view. Might sounds a little bit pragmatic, but I think that is fundamental to take care of a balanced built environment development, which would be the platform on which we can build a more sustainable society from a cultural and social perspective, more inclusive and more capable of living together. Because if the fundamental resources, energy, water, land, are mismanaged, this might make simply impossible to carry on all other conversations and actions around a more just society, in short. So this is a very interesting point in my view. And Ross actually is a firm believer that the digital age tools can actually help us, because the computational modeling is there to enable us collectively to manage and govern the incredible complexity that this environmental situation has brought to us. I will not spend too much time discussing in details. We know the recipe in a way. I think that the scale of the intervention, the scale of commitment probably stays as one of the grounding points of every educational program. In my view, this should be really, this is my personal view, but I believe that this is really at the core to protect the values of all the commitments that we have to make better spaces. There are examples of how you can work on the global warming, how the new currency, which is the CO2 emissions, can become a fundamental element for our students to know. But it is also an analysis of how the social infrastructure is providing that level of well-being that is protecting also the next generations in their future in terms of living together. So Ross is a firm believer of urbanization, meaning that this is happening. There's no way to stop it. We need to embrace it. And perhaps it's not, if it is well balanced with other different approach. And of course, every solution is singularly attached to place. No one is denying that, but it is possible for all of these large settlements to be designed according to a holistic system that he actually set up when he was at Spegard. We have started trying implementing this kind of mindset, especially connecting design protocols with big data analysis. The size and the scope and the accuracy of the exercise is within the realm of academic scope. But as I said before, I think it's super important to put the seed, this mindset in our students that we respond through design. Design is not our creation; is more of a response. It needs to take into account all the information that we have available to us, and there are the tools for doing that. I will speak a bit more about how we do it in our course in a bit, but then I would like to move to the second. Before doing that, I would like to move to the second contribution that I have selected from this series. This is Mario Cucinella, an Italian architect who actually probably had a very similar background to mine in a way in terms of where he's coming from. But Mario has proposed a very interesting way to look back at the past, looking to the past to look forward. After tracing a sort of history of sustainability, if you like, the more recent, but also the older one, when he came to visit us, and he presented similar data. I mean, we all agree that that the situation is critical, especially in terms of emissions, and especially in terms of considering the emissions through the entire life cycle of the building, not just the operational time, but also in terms of what is necessary to manufacture buildings and what happens once the buildings reach end of life. So this notion of circular design was at the core of his thinking, but interestingly enough, he has connected these idea that seems to be very contemporary with what was happening in the past. So he started looking at different places according to a range of climate conditions. And he looked at particular examples that he has found that were impressively clever in exploiting resources without having, additional energy sources, and making sure that there was an opportunity for recycle, for long-term use designed to last, and a very much in tune with not just the say the culture of building of a particular place, but also with the ecology. This is very interesting to me. In looking back at the past, he said, well, plants have been there for millions and millions of years before human beings, and they're still there. They survive. What do they do? There are scientists in Italy that study what has been defined the neurology of plants, how they react to the environment, how do they make decisions to grow in a certain way or to adapt. And so he's been studying these principles, and he's been trying to transfer some of these principles in the work that he does. This is a very interesting work. If you can, maybe you want to watch his Architalk. But what was interesting to me is that this is really a multidisciplinary approach that is looking back at the past and what the past can teach us from different perspectives. And his projects effectively take into account the opportunities that science and contemporary data mining can offer, but especially to prove the effectiveness of principles that can be used in contemporary architecture, also from ways that the natural realm have to the elements of the natural realm have to. The third point is a sort of an antithesis to artificial intelligence. I have few notes about artificial intelligence, and I'm very glad to hear that we will have a guest in this series who will talk about this more in depth. It's an emerging field, and we all are very eager to learn more and understand better how we can use this more as a tool. There is a strong preoccupation even at Curtin about, and probably it's worldwide in academia, about academic integrity or the impossibility to distinguish human from non-human work, especially when you say students. And I concur, there are some concerns, but it is super important to embrace these as an opportunity and look at the positives and make sure that actually we rethink the way we design and assess students' work, so that actually they can use AI as a complementary tool and be relevant and stay relevant. I think human beings are going to be relevant for a long time. And this is effectively what Peter Lee's position is in a nutshell. His question was, what is the future of architecture and what is the future of architects? Well, let's start from asking ourselves what we can do that machines can't do or cannot yet do. And he went back to very core value that once we have understood that the body of knowledge is shared and it is online, available 24/7 to us, and there is always the opportunity to get there and use that as if you like, as a support of our memory of the way we used to learn things by memorizing concepts in books. Well, now we have opportunities not to spend time doing that massively. What we need and can develop is different type of skills based on creative thinking, on critical thinking, and looking with curiosity at the evolution of the way we shape the world, from new materials, regenerative design, new practices. These are fundamental skills that every designer probably has always been nurturing in some way, but I think that away from creating schools of thought where students, by imitation, learn how to speak a particular architectural language or express their ideas in a particular form. It is more important to work with them to help them developing their own curiosity, their own understanding of what the discipline can offer to the built environment and to society. And the super important skills is also the ability to listen and then respond. And by nurturing these creativity and our sensibility in this direction, we are also able to respect cultures and help communities. Collaboration is critical, and I think that this sentence is something that I totally share. Organization and shared learning always beat masterism. In sport language, the champions team will always be the team of champions. And if we actually focus on the goal and the challenges that are in front of us, it's not about competing for who's the best, it's about competing for the best solution. And that's what Peter means when he says we have to learn how to do it better. The focus of our competition is for the best outcome, is not for our best reward, individual or group reward. It's really about the best outcome. And of course, going back to building science, having an understanding of knowledge and environmental knowledge is super important, but the future, the value is in the space between professions, the ability to bridge. Depth of knowledge has brought hyper specialization, which is incredibly useful when you have to dive deep vertically, but sharing knowledge together is absolutely critical. And architects probably have, by long-standing tradition, a culture that is about being holistic, that is about being humanist in the approach to knowledge and response, and also an ability to listen to others and integrate, synthesize different levels of thinking, different ideas coming from different disciplines and different interests, different stakeholders into a project as such. I think this is a quality that all designers probably have, and it's an incredible value that we need to nurture and develop further, even with the help of AI. So silos are not going to work anymore. This is particularly felt as a hurdle, especially in Australia. That is, we have a great culture of standards. We have a great culture of specialism, but when it comes to managing, complex artifacts like cities, which are the most complex artifacts we've been able to generate so far, that can be really an obstacle. And so, in looking at the next generation, we should definitely pay attention to how we facilitate our students' learning so that they can learn together, they can share, they're not concerned about, their own particular field only, but they're not concerned about the personal gaining, but in terms of knowledge and expertise, but through sharing, as I said before, is possible to reach the solution. So the approach to the profession, Peter, is really balanced in a sense. Of course, we have to respond to function and context, and there is an aspirational level that is probably what can bring people together. This is a fundamental point. I think that Ross Donaldson spoke about that when he said that it is possible, if we actually embrace the climate challenge altogether, it is possible to build a sort of cohesive ground also from an aspirational standpoint. I think that Mario was really focusing on listening and on the empathy of place, people, nature locally, has a lot to teach us. So there's this subtext, even in these great architects, to approach problems with a certain level of humbleness, knowing that they are more the catalyst of the reaction rather than the main chemical element that makes things happen. And I was also fascinated by the notion of beauty that Peter has brought in. Beauty is a way to actually build consensus. And I do agree with that. I think that Cucinella also spoke about the notion of beauty as a way to actually synthesize a product, a thought into a product, but far from being a sort of a post event styling operation. It is really coming from the process itself that generates that particular product. And I'm absolutely persuaded this, and this is one of the pillars in our teaching, that aesthetic value is a value, but it's an outcome. It's not a premise, and should always be a test at the end of the process to see if the process has generated a valuable outcome in many ways. So understanding aesthetic value as a result of the design process is another important element that we want to consider. I will spend a few minutes on the presentation that our former head of school, Nathaniel Belcher, gave as part of Architalk, and this was his reflection on how all of this contribution can actually come together, and how to listen to these ideas and see what the architecture course at Curtin could offer as a point of view. I have to say, I'm not sure if this is totally what Nathaniel thinks, but I've been working with him for about 3 years. I definitely share most of the positions and the project that have made our school as is today. We have now a new head of school, and probably we will endeavor in a new enterprise. But definitely, I can see that there are some good fundamental elements that make our course at least working and striving in the direction that I've been describing to you. There are many other lenses, there are many other layers, and I think that Nathaniel spoke about this briefly, and that's why I want to synthesize his thoughts in the next few slides, just to say that, yes, it's not just about climate change, data computation, or artificial intelligence. It is definitely about maintaining and nurturing some values that enable architecture to deliver ethical and societal values throughout. So I think that the points that Nat made when we rethought the way the school was going to be reorganized are the following. So the studio environment as a form of collective thinking, so beyond the design ego. The culture of making, this is a fundamental practice, I believe, for architects and designers as a way to understand and communicating ideas. Design as an acknowledgement and expression of identity beyond the individual. We always respond through our design to a collective, not just the stakeholders and the developers, but the users, the city administrators, the land, the custodians of the land, actually, in the case of Western Australia, with the landowners. And there are always different cultures, even in the most globalized context. So it's super important we understand that. Design and making are critical acts. This is a position that is strangely difficult to maintain in the Australian context. The Australian Research Council has a very particular, very specific definition of what they consider research. And they also have a very specific position about what they consider as practice-led or non-traditional research outcomes. It's not that easy to actually persuade, convince, and demonstrate that design making can be critical in the way they propose artifacts to communities, and they engage with the communities also through the process of making, not just the output. And then last but not least, urban culture, which means that every contribution is not just a single monad in an empty universe. Architecture doesn't happen in a vacuum, but the building or the artifact performs well beyond the object to it and become core to the present life and to people's life. Um, we had a great opportunity to translate these principles into action when we move to the new building. You just seen an image that is offering a number of facilities in labs for making, for 3D printing, different kind of spaces, learning spaces that are very close to studio. But they're no longer, they can also be used as classrooms, but they're no longer traditional classrooms, and they can offer through mixed modes, in person or online connection, an opportunity to expand the cohort that is participating in the learning. So the new building, which we moved 2 years ago, is effectively offered as a great opportunity, and was also a great opportunity, changing space and changing place, to really have an impact on the way we engage with our students. My colleagues have taken on board the points that you've seen in many different ways. What I'm offering you today is the way myself and my team and some of my colleagues have been focusing on those principles by establishing six, say, rather than principles, perhaps points of reference, actions that we practice in our teaching every day. I have to say that our course, as many other courses, is divided in or articulated in different streams: design, communication methods, technology, culture. This is the most common, together with professional practice. Then in each of them, there's a sort of a studio culture approach where the collective learning is part of what we do. The first principle is a balance between a sort of economic rationalism and design speculation. We do value both theory and practice, but for the reasons that I hope I explained before, we need to take them both into account and being relevant in the real world. So it is super important that, yes, from the one hand, we nurture ability of students to speculate, and there are some studios or some units that actually do that incredibly well. But there are other experiences in the course that enable students to embrace the pragmatic rationalism that our guests, for instance, offer when they come to visit. I have to say that I'm always more and more impressed by the ability of our industry partners to actually change hat and become more experimental or more pragmatic, depending on the objective of a particular learning experience, which I hope proves our point that both the extreme of this way of thinking and learning are absolutely important. At the core, we have sustainability, industry sustainability, and community are definitely three elements. Community and reconciliation are definitely our three pillars in our course, and these three elements are always present in different format and with different emphasis in everything that we do. And I think that we can perhaps say that overarching sustainable future is our main objective as a course. And to do that, we don't do it by ourselves. It is super important to have leaders in our room that actually help us doing that, and they lead the conversation. The amount of learning that every year our students and myself and everyone who is involved in this type of projects, again, is impressive. Is every time is an eye opener. The way indigenous people look at the built environment, the way they leave the place, the way they value cultural landscape in relationship with land and natural features is always a rediscovery. Something that perhaps we used to have maybe in some, in our, I don't know, Greek society, if I go back to my personal roots, but certainly we have lost contact, and it is actually very important for us to remind ourselves how this is making connection between people through land absolutely critical and relevant. The engagement with the physical place, the physicality of the place, is the counterpart of this discourse. Learning in place is super important for us. Perhaps we have a little bit of advantage compared to countries like Canada, where maybe being outdoor is not always as easy. But it is an important element, and it should be part of everything that students are exposed to. The ability to compare concepts and ideas with some practical materialization or lack of thereof in the built environment. It's really a way to involve them, their body, mind, and soul, really in developing critical skills. The expanded learning environment by extending the learning design experience through blended classrooms. This is a great opportunity that we have. This approach boosted definitely through during the pandemic, but it's now really part of what we do, and we have an opportunity to consult with students in many ways. We have noticed on the one hand, the students want to be on campus. This is really good signal, particularly after the experience with COVID. Western Australia was not that hit, but was long enough, especially for those students who were in the first year, and they had a very different first year experience. So it's super important that we offer these opportunities to connect, to stay connected. But I'm very, very pleased to see that there is consensus and convergence about being in class together, because being together, literally in the same space at the same moment in time, makes a difference. Can be complemented by other ways, but it's not easily replaceable by other ways in full. And I have to say that in our online course, where it is fully online, but we have done the best efforts to actually recreate a sense of community, even through an exclusive remote access to the same role. The incremental integration of traditional and advanced digital technology methods. Our curriculum still believes in analog techniques as a way of thinking. So in the first year, this is primarily what we teach. And then we transition to a more and more advanced digital technologies. I guess that what is interesting me the most, there are many colleagues who are incredibly interested in digital fabrication, which is, again, an emerging field. Mario Cucinella spoke about his projects with RAM Earth and completely 3D printed houses that were quite impressive. And certainly that's another field to look at with particular interest, at least for certain applications. But my main interest is to see how learning platforms and sharing your learning through web-based applications can actually help to reinforce this sense of collaboration in a global world where there are many practices that either have multiple offices or partner with other practices in different areas of the world, and they have to connect online and from time to time, face to face. So this is something that we have introduced. So the group work is at the core of what we do. And the working classroom has been radically reviewed from the one-on-one critique approach, where everyone is waiting for the 20 minutes or maybe less in these days to talk to the tutor and just find the light in the tunnel of their design sometimes, or discussing one-on-one particular architectural solutions. We have changed these, and we have moved to a group work where the discussion and learning from each other and actually developing particular components of the assessment, so that it is necessary for every member of the team to be part of the conversation, to be up to speed with what's happening in the team and how the design is progressing, is making really the difference, and is providing opportunities for an alliance between the team members and an opportunity then to discuss in equal terms with our stakeholders. And again, this is really something, it's been a discovery for me. Industry is generally very friendly. I've seen this in many countries, but here in particular, the level of participation in this model is being incredibly successful. This is a model that we have created through the Perth Urban Research Lab, where our approach and our mission has been everyone contributes: students, teachers, graduates, researchers, and industry and policymakers and communities. They are all in the same room at different times, maybe, but they're all involved in helping our students to grow their culture as future architects. I'm almost there. I just want to conclude this presentation with few notes on artificial intelligence, and perhaps this is more for conversation at the end of this presentation. The definition that I'm offering you was given by a professor from MIT. Interesting series of lectures. Now they are a few years old, but they are still available on YouTube. And it's a very technical one. It's about algorithms and procedures that support models of thinking, perception, and action. Perception is very interesting. Through a generate and test approach, which ties all of them together in a loop. So this is an iterative process. What I found very interesting is that in this series of lectures, this Rumpelstiltskin principle came through. Once you name something, you get power over it. And this actually made me think that there is an incredible space for us to leverage artificial intelligence, because as long as we are as human beings, we own symbolic thinking. We have power over the processes. And the more we can be simple and specific and precise in, just to make an example, in the prompts that you give to the machine, the more we can have control over the outcome, assuming that we are in control of the facts at the base of that processes. Getting the representation right is key to success. I think if you want to deal with AI and use it as a tool, you have a great opportunity to refine your ability to provide representations for the concept that you have. These texts that I read recently, among a few others, I found it very, very interesting because in spite of all the reports and researchers that we have been offered by the tertiary education agency that are all focusing on a very risk-based approach to AI. What's the risk and how do we need to deal with that? I think we all have read about how to design better assessments. Well, in the case of creative disciplines, there is a great space for critical thinking and originality in making decisions about problems. There is the other aspect that, of course, now AI can generate artificial images, can generate artificial videos, and it's impressive what these learning machines processes can actually generate. But what AI does effectively is that these manages these algorithms in how can I say, through data mining, can also learn about how to express particular process and protocols, regularizing the data source into a cohesive statement, or what apparently is a cohesive statement. But what the limits of AI are, and I think this article was very, very interesting in offering both the negatives and the positives, and I think that I concur with all of the above. Number one, AI is not a new concept. The first protocols was established by Weizenbaum in 1966, and then in 76, he was actually taking distances from the product that he actually developed, ELIZA. But effectively, if we look at the limits of AI, the machine buries its sources, so it's almost impossible to track back unless you design the protocols that way to track back to the original or the first elements, the first sources that the AI is digging. And they are incredibly numerous, so it's very complicated to actually have a comprehensive understanding of what has been the spectrum of the data that this process effectively explore and use. This is, to me, the second one is more important. The machine does have no notion of empirical truth. They just absorb facts as they are presented in other sources. And they have no conception of a theoretical frame or disciplinary practice. And that's absolutely true. The example is that the AI does not connect an engine to a car necessarily unless there is a protocol that already has done that in a particular text. From the ethics standpoint, the machine is very well mannered in responding because it is designed according to contemporary standards, but it's not a given that the sources that the machine has referred to necessarily do that. So even from this perspective, the ethic problem is they can build conclusions or present sort of discursive conclusions based on facts that have been completely filtered in a contemporary way. And that's a very interesting, it's a very interesting point, especially if you deal with social sciences and you refer to historic facts and the contested interpretation of those. And then the fact that it doesn't offer a critical dialogue is being uncritically affirmative. So it seems to be very affirmative, but it's really uncritical in the way they propose concepts. And that's why most of the answers are very, very diluted. But the usefulness is that they can iterate feedback processes if well instructed, and they can offer opportunity for humans then to decide what is the best or the most useful, or offer different angles in the way they reiterate mechanically a number of concepts, or they articulate them in a different using a different hierarchy. This is a practice that I actually use, especially with our thesis students in the Master of Architecture, when they are shaping the research question. They know the methods, they know what they want to do, they've done the research. They ask AI to provide them research questions, putting keywords, or maybe shaping a draft, the first draft of the research questions. And the output is quite interesting because the more you iterate, the more the AI generates different outputs. And amongst these, there is different emphasis of particular terms or a particular part of the problem. And it's really helping the students not to use that as an output to use directly as the research question, but it's very helpful for them to actually identify and understand where you actually want to put your focus and where you actually and how you actually want to shape the problem that you want to resolve. So it's an invitation for students to actually apply their critical skills. I found this particular aspect very, very helpful. And last but not least, yes, machines can be their products can be concerning, and we all value the emotional intelligence as a counterpart of the artificial intelligence. But we have to be mindful that humans can manipulate humans' thinking as well. So it all comes down to ethics and transparency, in my view, which is at the core of what we try to do at Curtin in our architecture course. And I thank you for your attention, and I'm more than happy to take any questions if I can answer to that. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Francesco. I am monitoring the chat and I am monitoring the Q&A section. And if anybody wants to just raise their hand, encouraged by the people in the picture, please, any questions? A good one. I don't see any hands at the moment, but I would actually like to ask a couple of questions to get things started. You have both a physical cohort who are there at the university, but you also have a virtual co-op that's online. Could you tell us a little bit about the virtual co-op? Do they ever get together physically, or is their entire degree virtual?
That's a great question, Douglas. On the one hand, we are very proud to offer a fully digital course where it is possible to study 100% online. And the reason for that is that in terms of accessibility to higher education, especially from remote locations or for groups of students, returning students or mature students with families or other commitments, it is for them a great opportunity because through the online learning, we can offer a much more agile, typical or atypical week. All of our courses, all of our units, the large majority of our units, I think, sorry, in architecture, all of them, and in some of other courses that the school offers, all of our units, I would say, offer an opportunity for contact, sort of a virtual contact, but contact is not just learning through online resources, but there is a component where you can engage in discussion with the tutors and with your peers. So the first answer is that given the opportunities that the fully online course offers, we still try to offer an equivalent of face-to-face experience in some form and in some moments. The other part of your question, I actually agree with you, and the school has started a program where online students can actually come to campus if they have an option and complete, if they want, 1 or 2 units face to face. So there is an opportunity, and we are working to increase these opportunities for actually for them to come and at least meet our students who take the course face to face. The most successful strategy has been in particular in the undergraduate program. The undergraduate program, all Australian students can access through a merit selection process through a scholarship that enables them to study abroad. The school has been incredibly successful in securing this government funding through the New Colombo Plan, which is sponsored by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And we opened this program to online students, and it's a great opportunity. Normally, if we travel with 10 to 20 students, 1 or 2 are normally from our online course. So they have an opportunity to spend number of weeks abroad and with our students during a study tour or other forms of other programs like internships, for instance. And we found that this is incredibly beneficial. But definitely, we want to increase opportunities for online students to have an experience on campus. It is more about the experience rather than concern about the learning the skills specific to the discipline, or if you like, it's more about the soft skills that reinforce their preparation for future or return to work. The best model to do that is offer intensive programs, 1 week, 2 weeks, so that they can afford coming. They don't have to leave their business or their family for a long period of time. But we definitely need to have a form of support to engage with some of these students who might want to come, but they do not have access to this particular experience very easily.
Wonderful. I'm looking for hands. I actually have another question, which I'll slip in. How many online students do you have, or how many is in a typical cohort for your virtual students?
Well, yes, the cohort in the first year are quite large. We have classes with 60 to 80 students. Normally, through the years, also they tend to start by taking a number of units in the first year. Then they slow down the studies for a number of reasons. So in the masters, we end up with having 30 to 40 students enrolled who takes units throughout the year. The units are offered every study period, so there is an opportunity to learn at your pace. Another important experiment that I didn't mention, we started this during the pandemic, and in some cases when the calendars align, we actually have online students and face-to-face students in the same room in the same sessions if they take the same units, so they can exchange knowledge and reasoning about the same project. Normally, we keep the brief the design studio briefs and the learning material is almost identical. It's just designed to be delivered online. So this is facilitating further cross-pollination between the two courses.
Wonderful. So you may have any at any given time 60 to 80 students, all in the same kind of level. And how many years of the virtual program would you have?
Oh, well, we have all the 5 years. So we have both the
5 years.
bachelor and the master. When we have large cohorts, normally we split them in smaller groups. So in a session like this one, you would have between 10 and 20 people maximum. So you actually split them in sort of tutorials, effectively, studio tutorials or class tutorials. So there is an opportunity for them to interact. And they have the opportunity to present as well, exactly as I did with you today.
Wonderful. I see that Adrian has raised his hand. Adrian, if you'd like to unmute and share your question, that'd be great.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Something that really stuck out to me was a line that said, "Our digital devices as our cognitive prothesis." And it made me think, do you think as technology becomes more emphasized and connected in our daily lives, that the emphasis on analog technologies and architectural education will become less in the future?
Well, maybe I'm very conservative, but my short answer would be I hope not. The reason for that is that as a person who actually relies on prosthetic technologies at all times, if I didn't have this meeting on my calendar, probably I was still having my breakfast this morning. There's an incredible level of support that is everywhere. Technology is ubiquitous, and we just not only we accept that, but we can use that maybe to relieve ourselves from certain repetitive practices or the need for additional support. So it's an incredibly liberating tool from on the one hand. On the other end, and I know this everywhere, not just in school, but also with my daughters, they're learning in a very different way, in a very different learning environment. But I noticed that there's still an attention that, particularly in primary school and somehow also in high school, that everyone pays to learning, for instance, learning by doing. So yes, there is a lot you can do with digital technologies also in the space of learning by doing, and 3D printing, controlling these processes is absolutely critical. It's the language of today. But in terms of developing your critical skills and actually discover that you learn with your whole body, it is absolutely critical we stay connected with the analog. The connection between our brain, the end, and the pen is still one of the most complex and agile tools that we have. You don't have to be an artist necessarily, but the ability to interrogate the word through these means is still absolutely critical, and is still quite rewarding if you offer it in a very positive way, not as a discriminating kind of skill. So for those, when I went to school, who of you knows how to draw? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. That was the first question that we were often asking when we were engaging in a design course. Who already knows how to draw? And then they were actually tearing you down, say, well, you have to forget everything about drawing. You have to start learning again. But that's not the approach that I would suggest in any way. And that's not the approach that we have. But it is critical to engage with that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for that. Now, Trevor, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I had a question.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Francesco. I was really interested in your hometown of Rome, and last year I actually fulfilled a lifelong ambition to visit the city and spend some time there, and it was just absolutely phenomenal place. I'm from a city in England, Cambridge, which is one of the oldest cities there, but to actually visit Rome was an amazing experience, and sort of walking around the city at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the warmth of the night, just beautiful. But there's so much there that survived and is still intact, and what we're doing now in construction and in architecture, what how if they had AI back then, would they have built the same buildings, or what can we learn from the past and sort of try and, as technology is advancing so quickly and the speed and different methods of construction, what can we learn sort of historically and building that sustainability, which, is a key part of your teaching, and I guess all of our teachings is that, what lessons are there that kind of transcend time and experiences like this?
Yes, thanks. It's a beautiful question, and it opens my heart because, of course, for me, it's been a great lesson, a lesson that I couldn't grasp fully when I was there because for me it was normal. I was born and raised in Rome. That was my hometown in a way, and it's only when I started traveling that I realized how lucky I was to have such an exposure. I don't think that there is a better place than any other. Actually, for me, it was an incredible challenge when I came to Australia because firsthand, I couldn't use much of the lessons that I used to consider fundamental in every place and for every act of architecture. The relationship between land and built environment is totally different. The nature is different. The infrastructure is different. The time in which cities have developed is different. And so the layering, the stratification, all of this knowledge initially said, I was really struggling to find a way to consider that, and it's just when I went back to the notional process that you actually mentioned that I realized that you can look at the past not just with the idea to imitate the past. If we consider that ancient Romans were actually incredible innovators in terms of technology. They discovered the hydraulic cement. They were able to build bridges in bricks, or while the previous technology was timber, and they were collapsing every 34 years. They made the vault a work of engineering long before it became a stylistic icon of the architecture and the making of space. They have produced a space that was really carved into the matter rather than made of addition of parts that is typical of Greek architecture, or most of Greek architecture that we used to know. So when we actually look at the processes and then you add the lens of some sustainability principles, what every civilization, pre-industrial civilization that had also the opportunity to develop in a very complex way, as it happens with Rome, before additional energy sources were available, and the only human resource was labor, and we have to be careful. That was part of the slavery system. That was part of a system that was very ruthless, even though, even from the social perspective, there was some interesting facts happening at the time. But in just sticking with the architecture, this rediscovering now that we need our sustainability tool, that is great to rediscover the value of building to last, for instance, or using local materials. Or leveraging the culture of construction that is typical of the place, because if you want the rediscovery of vernacular architecture, also the architects by non-architects, as a way to learn lessons from the daily life in the solution that they were offering with an economy of means that is incredibly neat and clean. And all of this is present not only in the monumental Rome, but especially in those areas where the cities were developing, where in the residential areas or in the infrastructural works. The ability to read and engage with the landscape. Romans were very able to drive river to change the direction of rivers, to irrigate soils. It was very imposing on the landscape, but at the same time, they, as well as the Etruscans or many other Mediterranean civilizations or Middle East civilizations or Asian, for that matters, of course, they chose where they wanted to live. They did not come with the idea that you can transform everything to your consumption. They were choosing very carefully what was the best place to live with minimal impact on the environment, because for them, the environment was the main source of resource for living in terms of energy, in terms of availability of water. They were very careful with the resources that they were managing. Roman aqueducts still bring clean, drinkable water today. They were designed not to be polluted by any particular material that was decaying after 30 years. There was an incredible attention to that. And the other incredible aspect is that this culture was very, very diffused. In my urban design course, it's a design course, so I just indulge in a sort of a half an hour lecture in explaining what a city is. One of the things that I tell my students that ancient cities, and this could be, you know, in Beijing, or in Tokyo, or in Kyoto, or in Rome, ancient cities were literally built by their inhabitants. They were part of the process. They were incredibly engaging with the making of all of these things. They were sharing common knowledge. They were learning from each other. All of these was not formalized in the protocol, but was happening. What we can do today in the complexity in which we live is actually use this form of community engagement, this form of sharing scientific knowledge together with social aspirations, and actually come to a conclusion what is the best to do and where and how. I think that it's the biggest lesson that history has taught us. And Rome is also a fantastic example of adaptive reuse. You know, someone says that Rome is one of the most resilient and sustainable cities ever because their buildings pay themselves up probably 20 times by now. So that's another important lesson. We have to be cognizant that there's been a paradigmatic shift in building technology with the siderurgy and, you know, the availability of energy and steam power and so on. And you know, the steel came in and iron came in, and then concrete. It's interesting now that we're starting to look back at these materials holistically, at the process of making, and actually assess when is really useful and valid to use them in construction, rather than say it is the cheapest solution now or is the easiest one. Especially when you think of, you know, embodied carbon and all of those principles. I think that science is helping us to recode those principles that were embedded in the culture of making of ancient times. That's a great lesson that we can actually use. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. And I see that Gerard has his hand up as well. Please.
Hi, thank you. My name's Gerard. I'm from Edmonton, and I really appreciate the talk, Dr. Mancini, and the University, Athabasca University, for presenting it. I like your combined accent from Australia and in Italy. I've traveled to both countries, and it's beautiful to hear both at the same time. And one of my favorite cities of all the places I've traveled, and I've been fortunate to travel it. I'm older now than my students. My wife and I were in Italy just last year, and Rome is by far, of all the places I've been, it's very inspiring for an architect or someone that likes to be the love of architecture. So I guess my question is, have you seen any groups of professionals or students leave school and put some of these ideas or creative processes into practice, and how successful have they been? I'm being a retired business person and looking at a second stage of my life to study what I've always found most interesting. This type of concept appeals to me because I'm in an ability to perhaps do that someday. Leave that open for discussion, and yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Gerard. Yeah, well, I'm actually quite proud to say that it's been a collective effort from the teaching team, but also a really collective effort with the students in helping them to develop not only these skills, but also a proposition and a scope for them to apply this particular way of working elsewhere. So it's interesting for me because we have a few students. I have a graduate, she's fantastic, and she's really into the community engagement. And she is really doing fantastic work in engaging with communities to understand better how design can provide a shared solution. There is another graduate who just registered a couple of years ago, and he has founded a sort of intercommunal group that is called co-architecture, and it's facilitating through events, discussion, workshops, the opportunities for young graduates to enter the professional world, and actually is also inviting experts from all the areas and the fields to contribute to creation of a common culture of sharing. So he is made of this particular approach, a profession, really invented a startup that is actually growing in Australia. And the spectacular side of it is that he's attracting also experts from other fields. So he's really helping bridging the gaps between different disciplines and different ways of thinking. So it has generated exponentially in that regard. And the third example that I'm bringing, and I'm not responsible for all of their degrees at all. I just did my bit whenever I met them in class. But I think that another expression of this ethos is we have probably it's our first Aboriginal registered architect in many years in our school. I cannot be very precise about this because some of them do not self-recognize or self-identify officially. But he has embraced in a very humble manner the opportunity to lead in that space, and what he's been doing, pursuing his research on what does it mean in Indigenous architecture in Western Australia, and more generally global, what is the contribution? He has basically shaped his work in a way he's making space for us to enter his space. And I found that this is just fantastic. We always feel, and I still feel, I'm if you look at me, I'm a white Italian male, middle age, probably, and potentially the stereotype of a very of a person who is engaging, who has engaged with a culture that is very different from these point of views of today. And for that reason, not that I feel like that, but certainly I can be perceived like that, and words in my mouth can be understood in different ways. And this has generated a lot of concern and preoccupation for many of my colleagues, especially those who came from Europe to Australia in the first years, to engage in this space, in the third space, because we didn't want to send the wrong message. And having graduates who actually keep offerings, and inviting you to that space, as our fantastic Indigenous colleagues do, it's amazing, and I think it's one of the greatest outcome. So yes, in that sense, I think I responded to your question. I'm sure that beautiful buildings will emerge from all of this practice, but it's the practice that I'm really proud of.
Thank you, Gerard. And I see Keys has put his hand up.
Yeah, really fantastic to hear out of Australia this lecture. And a couple of months ago, I attended a lecture in Red Deer by all means that was organized by the Alberta Roofing Association on AI, and the executive director kind of mentioned, I think I was one of the few ones that attended it, and so she said, addressed me as the nearly obsolete architect, and because they expecting, when I always get upset when I hear clients asking, well, you will do 4 proposals for me, and I will pick the right one. And then I'm sure in Australia there will be the same type of wording there too. And I'm kind of scared in a way with AI that you can give hundreds of different solutions to complex or whatever it is. And so I I'm a little scared of the future, having people looking at too many proposals and so on, because you put your whole heart and soul into a design, and then they want something else to see, and who are we in a way to discuss it? But the Guardian, little magazine now, it used to be the Manchester Guardian, had a wonderful article on AI, and then the journalist went to visit one of and former employee of OMA, and she developed a new, I think it was something, Good Morning Cloud or whatever it was, the name of it. And he asked, how fast can you design me a 20-room hotel? And 20 minutes later, she came back with the whole hotel of 20 rooms, etc. And you know, what is the depth of that? Is that a bowl of soup of hundreds of 20-room hotels, or is that the thinking of the person? And I would like a reaction from you on a few things I've just said. Yeah.
Well, no, this concern is there, but let's say it's a half full or half glass, half empty glass there, because it is also an opportunity. 30 years ago, if 30, 40 years ago, to design an auditorium, you had to build a scale model and test the acoustics there. And now you can do it digitally. You can have 20 solutions. But yeah, as long as you maintain the ability to critically analyze and actually describe and communicate what's the value and what's the pros and the cons of each solution, I think we have an opportunity to engage with clients or stakeholders. But there is another level that is, to me, more important than that. Agreeing on a project implies an agreement on ethic values, and implies an agreement on benefits that come to a larger group stakeholders that can be then transformed in profit for the developer. This is part of the game, but this kind of assessment is not yet replicable through AI. There is a component that we refer to as return brief. So when the client comes to us with a brief, the first thing that normally architects do after they set an agreement is to discuss the return brief, trying to actually mining or interrogate what the client aspirations are, because sometimes clients needs to have, sometimes they have very clear ideas, sometimes they don't, or sometimes they discover that there are some other hidden values that the project can unlock. All of these probably cannot happen yet through AI, because the ability to engage in ethic discussion, or the ability to engage in critical thinking, I think it's outside the sphere. At the moment, what these protocols, these large language protocols in other processes can dig, this is my understanding, is really a reconfiguration of existing information in such a way that they can offer to our eyes innovation. Perhaps, but it's to our eyes. I don't think we are close yet to a machine that says this is the best solution for you, because again, the sources of data and the basis of the problem needs to be spelled out in a very transparent manner to make sure that once you receive a comment, say this is the best answer, that is really the best answer you're looking for, the best possible answer. But it is out of question that will be with us, and perhaps we'll do something that we are used to do and we no longer do. Diagnosis through AI in medical fields is becoming more and more accurate, because they have access in legal sectors, the access to all the sentences, all the various determinations worldwide is impressive. So clearly, those functions are performed or can be performed much better than a team of human beings. But this doesn't mean that at the end of the day, you know, the decision, most of our decisions are based on ethics, and that's where I see the limits of AIs here today.
Thank you very much. But by the way, we still built in our office little models still for expressing to the people.
Well,
and the other day I was at City Hall making a presentation on a project, and they said, "Where's your model?" And people expected it from certain people. So
yes,
great.
yes, no, I understand that, but I think that probably the skills of an architect or a designer would be more and more sharing the journey with the clients in traveling through all the options and the possibilities. It's like learning from internet. You need to be able to navigate this ocean of information. And that's what our kids are learning. And they're learning also the principles behind it. So they have a literacy in coding, they have a literacy in different forms of mathematics. Compared to my times, they do much more statistics than what I used to do. It's just a different language and different structure of that is enabling you to understand and drive decisions. So perhaps the way we teach architecture will be less and less based on specific productions of buildings, and we will rely much more on the support of these type of tools or companions, depends on how independent they become. So yes, there is a need for us to rethink what's our role. That's definitely, but there are still fundamental components of our profession that will stay with us.
Well, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for that question. I'm just looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. I don't see any. I do see a comment in the chat, which is James Lennox said, "Thank you as well for your presentation. Good night, Eliza." I just wanted to share with you very quickly. Joseph Weizenbaum, when he made Eliza, which is basically it's a very simple program, which sort of does Freudian psychiatry, and you say something and then it just finds a keyword, like, you know, you say, "Oh, I'm not getting along with my mother," and the thing just would say, "What is it about your mother that bothers you?" And it was just a simple asking of the questions, but people got so engaged with it that his administrative assistant, for example, asked him to leave the room when she was trying it out. But he became so upset and disturbed by the reaction that he got to this very simple, question and answer thing, that he actually wrote a book which is well worth reading. It's called Computer Power and Human Judgment, and it was written in the 70s, but it's one of the best books about the limits to computation. And so if anybody's interested, it's a really interesting book. But I see that Trevor has got his hand up.
Just one more quick question, because I'm really enjoying this talk, Francesco, and
Thanks.
like you referred to quite a lot of partners and the team effort, that this is lots of collaboration. You mentioned Woods Bagot and some of the other lecturers in industry, and I find that sometimes that's a difficult bridge to build between academia and industry. And I know Earl Arney from Woods Bagot from a few years ago, and just the way that industry works at such a different pace to academia. And I think one of your slides said you had to decide whether to go into PhD in academia or go into practice, and that seems to be like a bridge that you've kept building and kept crossing over from to keep that open. What's been your biggest sort of challenges and successes in that sort of experience?
Thanks, Trevor. Effectively, I think that this was really my commitment to bridging academia and industry actually comes from my personal interest and my personal struggle in reconciling this word. I had very intense experiences both in academia at the time of the PhD and in practice. And I was always finding very complex to reconcile any of those. Or I know that some of the colleagues, both in Italy or in Australia, elsewhere in the world, they have practice heavily informed by theory. So it's what they call practice-led research. But still, I was looking for a different kind of balance, with the idea to make a lot of or to explore how a lot of speculative thinking can have impact in the real world, how it can come to terms with that. I think I've been quite fortunate in my experience with industry, both in Italy and here in Australia, because some of the practices have been very receptive. Number one, to the idea of giving back to students, and this goes well beyond, then getting the best graduates for an internship or some good talented designer who can make a difference in a studio. It was really about a concern and preoccupation for the next generation that opened the door both ways. And what I actually found out is that many of these CEOs and directors are very interested in listening to what young students have to say, because even in their naivete sometimes, but they exactly because of that they can offer perspectives that you would normally exclude in practice. And so leveraging on this potential richness, it's not so much the outcome again, but in the process there is a sparkle that can contaminate, that can reach out. Practitioners who have been maybe doing that the same way for 20 years. But I think that the difference is in their mindset as well. If they're open to the fact that, industry is constantly changing, and the interest might be just to keep their practice alive, to always look for new ideas everywhere they can. And no one has ever turned down a second year, first year review just because they thought there was of no use for their interest. And I guess that this was really the common ground, and everything else was built upon that in collaboration. And I think that I brought that spirit. I said, look, there are a number of values. There's some value in sharing the academic arena, because it's a neutral platform. No one gets hurt, and you can actually discuss about a problem in a very speculative way, but also looking at the future. Just to give you an example, I'm running a studio that is about adaptive reuse, but we said, well, let's push it further, and rather than focusing on conversion of existing buildings into offices, which we will probably do next year, why don't we ask students to design an office building that can be converted into housing when the moment comes, and can be. And this is clearly a theoretical problem. It doesn't have an immediate application, but actually looks at the problem of conversion and adaptive reuse from a different angle. And so some interesting considerations are coming out from that. And now we are discovering that the studios we are partnering with, they are doing exactly the same thing already in Sydney. They are looking at what's the next generation of buildings. Now that we have to convert in many CBDs 20-30% of the existing vacant buildings into housing or schools or hotels or other types of buildings. So yes, I guess that the curiosity and the openness to where new ideas can come, or where different perspectives can come from, has been my motivation. And I have found support in that regard. So clearly it's not just it is my goal, but it's not just my own success. We found fertile soil in that space.
Thank you. That's very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Francesco. There's thanks in the chat as well from people for the lecture.
Thank you.
I
Thank
don't
you
see any
so much.
further questions or comments. So let me just say thank you very much, Francesco. It was a wonderful presentation. And we look forward to working with Curtin University in the future. And I would just simply invite people as well to next Tuesday. Now, next Tuesday, this will be at 9 o'clock in the morning Mountain Time, or for Francesco, 11 o'clock at night. But everybody is welcome and there and all the time zones in between. So I hope you'll join us next week when I'll be talking about what we do at Athabasca. And again, this has been a wonderful series, and we look forward to seeing everybody again. So thank you very much. And thank you again, Francesco.
Thank you so much, Douglas and all, and thank you for making
Okay.
this series possible. Thank you.